Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Chris, your sneaker professor, making sure you guys go visit arch-usa.com for more. I guess I want to get this down to a science and say more in-depth analysis of the sneaker industry. There we go. That's a good one. Now, today's discussion is about On Running, and I've been kind of playing with this juxtaposition of On versus Allbirds. And last week I did a video on Allbirds explaining why Allbirds was encountering difficulties in the market. Now, the interesting thing is, a couple of years ago, it was just last year because both companies just IPO'd in the last year. I did a comparison and I said that Allbirds had a bit of a better opportunity if they did things correctly because On was so successfully moving into the marketplace and running into their IPO. Now, understand when I say that Allbirds had a little bit better, what I was looking at was Allbirds had apparel that they could move into. They had a relationship with natural fiber welding that they could have utilized. They could have created different styles. They were working with Pensole. They had all of these different things that were at their that was in their tool belt if they were like Batman. But they didn't utilize any of those things. On, however, I noticed that On was going to start expanding distribution, and I was worried about that. So when I looked at On, I was like, On's doing great already. They've already showed a profit, so they're walking into an IPO as a better prepared business. So expanding distribution could introduce them into a marketplace that's going to be difficult. And that's what I kind of built my, comparison upon. But I wrote this article, On Running's Q2 2022 holds a compelling discussion on reach and research. And why is this important? Because they've had an explosive year. It's been incredible. But, and this is not to dump on Running, which is interesting because I wrote this article prior to actually doing a retail dive when I was in Miami. So I went to a mall and I found On in a lot of different stores. And then I found On in another retailer. And I can't remember the name of the retailer right now. I kind of have it in my head, but I won't even say the retailer's name. It confirmed something and it gave me an update on a concept that I came up with. Now, I have this thing that I call the 3 to 5 year taper. Now, you won't find that anywhere. You won't go outside of my website and find that anywhere. It may already exist as far as retail is concerned and, stock market, but I'm not a stock market analyst, so don't take anything I say and use it for fuel for making decisions. I'm simply doing analysis and making predictions. So the 3 to 5 year taper is something in business where, you know what? Let's get to the article because you'll really understand what I'm saying. And I will also show a discussion that I placed on that I didn't put on the website. I put it on LinkedIn with a couple of pictures. So let's get to this. On had a very strong first half 2022 with second quarter 2022 results gain exceeding expectations to surpass CHF 500 million net sales for the half year. Q2 net sales increased by 66.6%, driven by a strong wholesale growth of 70.1% and a DTC growth of 60.8%. So you have all of this growth for On. And it seems as if whatever On did before they IPO'd, they've carried over into the marketplace since they've IPO'd. And the growth is good. I'm not saying that it's not. Let's keep reading. All right. So reach and research. These are the two words that I want you guys to kind of think about in regard to this post and this video. Reach and research are two words that won't show up in any analyst reports. Now, analysts are important because if you noticed over here on the page for On stock, you'll see it says analyst rating in this section right here. And then it says that On Running is a buy, right? And I got to move this out of the way because I'm highlighting stuff. They say that On Running is a buy. You have 4 people, and then you have 2 people saying hold, and then 1, and then 0 saying sell. So On, right now, the stock is in fantastic shape. But I'm not an analyst, so I move a little bit differently when I talk about things. So you won't find reach and research as a part of the toolkit of analysts. And That's because analysis of On running requires nuance beyond simply staring at the numbers. And when you look at these numbers, they're incredible, growing at a North America region, growing at 102.5%. All of that looks great. But just staring at the numbers is not the way we should approach this. We should always look at things and bring it back down to earth a little bit and find out why. There has to be a why. Okay? Reach for On is a matter of expanded distribution. Research for On consists of a considerable amount of marketing and product development. On has utilized the playbook of bigger brands who have sponsored running clubs and taken feedback from athletes to build smarter, better performance footwear. All of this is good. And I had an executive from On go and reach out to me on LinkedIn with a very terse, short question. No introduction, there were no salutations, nothing. He just asked a question, and then he ghosted me and disappeared when I didn't give him whatever answer he was looking for. And it was a very strange thing to me. And I was like, what's up with that? Where am I going with this conversation? When I moved this discussion over to LinkedIn, it happened because of a retail dive, but let's keep going, okay? So this is all good stuff. So far, we're doing good stuff, all right? On is compelling because there are several important factors that analysts can't understand because they don't look at all aspects of how sneaker retail works. When a company goes public, this is critical, they reach a bigger audience. That's simple, right? What does this mean? Let's break it down into these small details, and I'm going to maybe try to figure out if I can animate this in some way and give you, infographics or something to make this clear, because this is going to get a little bit confusing, but just follow along, all right? If we think about On Running's model prior to the IPO on a big scale, and these numbers are made up, okay? I'm making up these numbers as I go and write this and explain it to you. Let's say On, prior to the IPO, sold 100 sneakers direct to consumer, 50 sneakers via wholesale with specialty running stores. After the IPO, they distribute to mainstream retail sneaker stores like Foot Locker, Finish Line, Shoe Palace. This introduces On Running to an entirely new market. This market tends to buy sneaker culture footwear like Yeezy and Jordan brand. There's a small percentage of the visitors to those mainstream retail stores who might try On because they look comfortable. These consumers may have never heard of the brand, but they like the fit. On adds 5 more sales at these new doors, right? And I'm looking at one store basically. So through their own store, they're selling 100, and this is before IPO, and 50 to DTC. And then when they go to the IPO, they sell another 5 pair in one door, right? Adding 5 pair delivers growth of 3.3%, which is very good. Now, let's base this same idea with a more realistic picture. At specialty retail, where On has seen its success, specialty running stores, they reach about 20 consumers. Now, I'm looking at one store still, 20 consumers. Through their own door, they sell 15 pair. Now, you add those 5 pair from mainstream retail, and the growth rockets to 14.29%. This is not, obviously not exact data, but the numbers provide a lot of insight into the initial spike. Remember that word, initial spike, for On Running via new accounts. On doesn't have to be a major player in these new doors to show considerable growth because they've never been there before. The initial spike takes 3 to 5 years for a company that is already performing well to level off. The initial spike takes 3 to 5 years. That's what I used to think. Now, I just wrote this article last week when I saw that amazing growth that On experienced. and something happened. So let's keep going. On Running understood their market prior to the IPO. They doubled down on performance while also adding a new demographic. If On Running doesn't make any wild acquisitions or decisions based on the initial spike, when the growth tapers, so it goes up, and when it tapers, the company won't collapse and lose steam. They will simply adjust. Now, if we compare this to Allbirds, who was not making running shoes and had very limited SKUs and a niche market and hadn't turned a profit prior to their IPO, the result is much different. Allbirds didn't add wholesale. They didn't have a product that was easily distinguishable, and the outcome has been in direct contrast to On. When you see an On shoe, you know it's an On running shoe. That is critical to the success of a brand. When you see an Allbirds shoe, and I talked about this in the Allbirds video, you cannot tell the difference between it, La Mouton, Babouk. I can go through the list of, you saw the video, you know what I'm saying. On is easily distinguished because of their midsole-outsole combination, easily distinguishable. All right? There are a number of moments where analysts could have predicted that On would do well. I'm still not big on the expanded distribution, and this is where I get into the difference in the discussion. But until retailers like Foot Locker began to place On in a promotional cycle, which is less likely, with Nike decreasing their allotment to Foot Locker, On will have a solid presence at retail. This is the first instance where On's timing has benefited them. So this amazing growth that On is experiencing, it really happens for a number of reasons. COVID, a lot of people working out and trying new footwear during COVID and quarantine. Carry over from that was Nike's removal of accounts, diminishing sales to Foot Locker. Nike giving up shelf space, basically, has really assisted a lot of brands in doing better. I'm going to get to that though, but let's keep going. Until On faces the problem of a promotional cycle at these mainstream new retailers, they're just going to be okay. So Nike's closing of accounts provided wall space and opportunity. This wasn't the only place where On's potential was. I did these posts that are down here, and it shows how On was using research, all right? And let's look at, as a matter of fact, we're going to open this up and look at this. And it's about On turning carbon emissions into running shoes. Clean Cloud was the technology. On was using research, and they were building better products. On has a grasp on what they are as a company. I never said that On was going to fail. Now, I'm doing two things here. I'm talking to you guys, and I'm explaining what happened here on LinkedIn. All right. Now you got the On Athletics Club, and this was something that was extremely important for On, as it solidified them with the performance running marketplace, which they already had a good grasp with specialty running. All right, so they created the On Athletics Club in Europe and in Colorado, and at the World Championships, I even wrote about this. On performed very well. They had people who were winning events. That's fantastic. So did Hoka, but we're not talking about Hoka. On Running being profitable before the IPO was critical to the growth they are experiencing. But the introduction to new distribution outlets, and I shouldn't even say it, but the intro, because it makes it sound like I'm about to be negative. The introduction to more distribution outlets is a guaranteed bump. The initial spike. The issue for On will be when those new outlets place them on promo and RTVs become an issue. Because On does not have a lot of regional brand doors around those areas where On is being carried in these new retailers, On will incur ridiculous expenses with returns, and that's a ball game that has to be played in a different way because those red tags and on sale promos will shape how specialty running may have to counter the expanded distribution. Hope that was clear. When I was writing this, I said that I can't write this as if I always knew On would perform well. I've written posts explaining that On product was dusty on shelves at JD Sports. I even shared videos of sneakerheads on YouTube having no idea what the brand was. I wrote those posts before Nike announced they would be reducing Foot Locker's allocation and removing more accounts. The ripple effect around Nike's removal of wholesale accounts has had an unintended consequence. The rise of smaller performance brands, Brooks, Puma, New Balance, and these are not small companies by any means, these are billion-dollar companies. All of these brands have seen considerable growth as Nike's presence has been reduced at the biggest retailer in the world in Foot Locker. All of this is a very compelling topic to consider. Reach and research are vital, but it definitely helps when the biggest brand in the business has made it easy for retailers to give shelf space to upstarts. That was not always the case with Nike. Nike very rarely gave up shelf space. So when I went out and I did this brand, this retail dive, and I've been saying 3 to 5 years, that's how long it takes for something to level off. I wrote this post on LinkedIn after being out at a local retailer in Miami. And I showed these pictures with On running at 20% off. And then I showed this table. And this table is really problematic. Because this is a 20% off, it's a discount table. Typically your shoes will be in the back. So this image, these two images, show something that On has to start considering, and it forces me as a researcher and a person who gives you guys this information on the sneaker industry to reconsider things. So in a recent post about On running, I explained why On's amazing growth and the successful year they had are emblematic of what I call the initial spike post-event. Let's think about a company like Hibbett Sports. They were struggling, right? They launched e-commerce, I think it was back in 2016, 2017, when Jeff Rosenthal was the CEO. They're the president of the company. So he created this e-commerce with the team and they launched it, and Hibbett Sports began to grow in a completely different way. They had what I call the initial spike momentum. Now, remember 3 to 5 years, things will begin to taper and fall off. Jeff Rosenthal left Hibbett's and a lot of change began to happen. But COVID and the elimination of Nike's kind of wholesale accounts gave Hibbett Sports a reset at the 3 to 5 year mark for their website growth. Now, that's an example of how the initial spike works. Something has to come in to either fix or it will cause a fail. All right. So On's running spike was their IPO. In this article, I explained that it would take a few years before they would have to adjust and make decisions. In this article, I also stated that their decline would be shaped by the expanded distribution into doors where they should not be. I thought On would be safe for at least 3 years. In a mall a couple of days ago, I did an unofficial retail dive, and that's where I found this table. The visual merchandising in that store was poor, but it's standard for that type of retailer. On had wall space between Nike and Adi, and I noticed the white sticker. When I continued walking through the store, that's when I saw the footwear stacked on tables in the back of the store. In this post, I explained why expanded distribution concerned me, and that On's growth was due to more availability in non-traditional stores than the specialty stores that made On profitable. My concern was always what I call the bloody wall. At this store where you see these pictures, it's only 20%. But when there are 3 locations for products in a store, specifically in that mall, then those other stores are going to react. In that particular store where that big sales table was, having 3 places where On was kind of placed inside of the store shows that they're trying to blow out the product. Especially when they do a warehouse style stack of shoes. That's problematic. On's only a year removed from their IPO, and it appears that the post-spike decline is starting. But this means that the 3 to 5 year initial spike, the decline has been accelerated. On's going to have to adjust much sooner than I thought. So what I'm doing here is I'm explaining. I'm not disrespecting On running. If you think that, you're not listening to what I'm saying. Okay? I've written over and over about the different beautiful marketing tactics of the company. I've explained that a lot of the things they've done, it's just been really great timing for them, including the rock wearing the shoes. They've even had a surprising sellout of the Roger Federer design shoe, the Clubhouse. You know what I mean? So On is just in this particular place where they haven't had to deal with heavily discounted shoes being in the same stores as Nike and Adidas and all of these other brands. At specialty retail, the runners who work there can work better and assist On. This is not a good look. And you can see stuff sitting on the table over here in the picture. This is a bad situation. So am I right or wrong about the initial spike tapering much faster now? Remember, I did an Adidas article a couple of weeks ago and found that the NMD was already on sale before the shoe basically released. It seems like the runway for time in the sneaker industry is getting shorter. It's getting much shorter. But that's it. I know this was a long video. Those of you who listen through these things, I appreciate you for listening, because it's not easy material. It's not just cool sneakerhead stuff. It is really in depth, and I appreciate you guys for kind of riding with me for as long as you decide to ride with me on these talks. On Running is doing fantastic. I'm not saying that they're failing. I'm simply saying that they are at a point now where they're being marked down. How they adjust, that's what the story is. How they adjust is what the story is. I'll see you guys on the next one. Hope everybody's doing great out there. More Sneaker Professor style stuff coming. That's it. Peace, y'all.